under 2 weeks to go. Obviously, there's a feature that's been put on a lot of people's lips, I must admit, and that's going to be the ground deformation. So they released a little bit of a blog preview and engine interview on the old ground deformation, and it's got Eddie Edwards, senior software engineer. So it starts off, it's not a secret anymore that the ground in Farming Simulator 24 will deform, but you want some details, don't you? Well, go and get some. So alongside new screenshots visualizing how the ground will deform, senior software engineer Eddie Edwards from Giant Software will go further into detail on how it actually works. So it's as his title would suggest, he's a senior software engineer. So tell us about your position first and what's your role. So he is one of the senior engine programmers for Farming Simulator. I've been at Giants since the early days of FS13, created the original PlayStation 3 port, and I've been responsible for other ports of the Giants engine to PS4, PS5, Switch and iOS. Very much a PlayStation guy, so yeah, I'm an Xbox, but alright, it works on both, it's fine. But he also works on cross-platform engine technology such as density maps, rendering, shader compiler, some physics and audio, etc. There's not much in Giant's engine that he hasn't worked on, and to some extent over the last 12 years, and in particular, of course, he's created new technologies that bring us ground deformation for FS25, the improved density map system, the new terrain geometry system, and the terrain virtual texturing system. Now, to be fair, that's a lot of computer speak, I must admit. But obviously it all works together, it all works in conjunction. So obviously all that's going on, I'd say behind the scenes, you know, as you're playing the game, to give it the aesthetics that it's giving. Right, so fair enough. And we have got a bit of a question and answer on this. And it starts off, so depending on the ground type, the deformation and compression of the soil is dependent on multiple factors, as you can well imagine, like in real life. So which factors define how the ground deforms? So Eddie says a number of factors affect this. Firstly, every ground type has a different level of firmness and viscosity. Oh, I like that word, viscosity, how slowly or quickly a liquid moves, but alright, fair enough. Tarmac cannot be deformed at all, for instance, while mud can be deformed a lot due to different firmness, and driving on snow instantly crushes it, while driving on mud causes it to compress over a longer time due to different viscosity. Also, if the ground is wet, this affects the deformation as well. Which vehicle you're driving also affects the deformation. The weight of the tractor and the width of its tyres both affect the reaction of the terrain, and the slower moving vehicle will sink faster than a fast moving vehicle. So if you've got a ton of snow everywhere, just gun it, go for it. It's going to be a lot easier, but alright, no worries. So how does the ground deformation affect gameplay? What will players feel? So for the first time in FS25 gives a real physical response from the terrain. You will feel the tractor bumping over the ground, and you will see it creating ruts and tracks, and if you go back and drive over those ruts and tracks, you will feel the effect from them as well. It's also harder to steer if you have dug into the ground, just as it is in real life. Driving in rain will be more difficult when driving when it's sunny. Your tyre configuration now has a greater effect too, and you may need to consider which tyres are best for use in different seasons and different types of fieldwork. That's interesting, because obviously on 22, yeah, we do have the different tyre sizes and whatever, and whilst there might be a slight difference, particularly if you're going for twins or something like that over narrows, but it's not really that much of a thing, but it sounds like it is going to be now. Right, fair enough. Now, obviously, the tyre deformation, however you want to pronounce it, is not the only thing that's going on. Obviously, implements in the ground is going to be making a difference as well, and they mentioned ploughing. So while the deformation on the soil is individual to the machines, their weight and other conditions, one field activity in particular will probably feel a whole lot different in Farming Simulator 25. So what kind of machine stroke equipment will showcase ground deformation best? Well, he says, ploughing is a new experience now. The plough creates real physical furrows which can not only be seen more clearly on the screen, but also affects the tractor when driving over them. Also, machines with caterpillar tracks come into their own now, as they can handle the uneven ground so well. Oh, that's ace. I mean, obviously, you got the texture on the field as you're going over it in FS22, but now you're going to be going over the field and, you know, you're going to be bouncing your brain out if you haven't got a a tractor with decent suspension on it. But oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. And then we get into the more technical side of it. So about the performance, visuals and challenges. So what are the technical challenges in implementing ground deformation? Now sit yourself down for this, because it's it's a lot to take in. So he says the ground deformation works on a grid size of 12.5 centimeter, which works out to be 16K by 16K for a 2 kilometer map. That's 256 megapixels. The map itself is only 4 megapixels. There are also various technical challenges with storing this data efficiently, and also when processing the data efficiency. For instance, when tools like cultivators or plows work in the fields, and when vehicles drive over the fields and react to these fine scale bumps and ridges. There's also a procedural level of ground deformation, which is mapped with geometry in a similar way to how the terrain is texture mapped with images, except it runs in the CPU instead of the faster GPU, so we had to heavily optimize this code. Now, I've just read through that, and it doesn't mean a lot to me. I'm not really into coding or anything like that, but obviously it works. It's going to work great. Obviously this is the reason, let's face it, why it's coming out on next gen console, or current gen at this point, rather than old school. So that's probably why you're going to need an upgrade, but alright, fair enough. Now he carries on. How is the ground deformation data stored and managed? So since ground deformation works at a higher resolution than we've dealt with before, we wanted to save memory in areas which are not deformed, as in rocky mountains or in places where the player has not yet been. So we created a sparse version of the density map. This stores tiles of data only in regions where deformation actually exists. Furthermore, to reduce memory footprint even more, the tiles are all compressed using a more advanced version of the existing density map compression that we've used in the past. Additionally, to support fast operations on this high resolution data, we created a density map processing unit, or a DPU, which is like a little GPU emulator that runs on the CPU and is capable of performing operations on density maps at much higher speeds than previously. It can actually be programmed using our in-house shader language, although this feature is not yet used in FS25. For speed, the whole system, the data compression, DPU operations, and procedural generation is written using native SIMD instructions, which is SSE 4.1 or AVX2 on PC and console, and Neon and ARM based Macs. Man, that's a lot. That's hard to say. There is far more SIMD optimized code in this version for Farming Simulator than we've ever done before. Now, to be fair, out of all that, right, I get that they've made this new SIMD instructions, console and Macs and PC and whatever. What I get from that is the whole sparse bit. So basically, if it's not in your area, then it doesn't render it. If it's far away, obviously it doesn't do whatever. That's what I'm getting from that anyway. I hope that's correct, because if not, I don't understand this at all, but alright, fair enough. So tell us about how you optimize the deformation physics for performance. So in previous versions of Farming Simulator, the custom vehicle physics was dealing with terrain at a resolution of 0.5 meters. With terrain deformation and displacement, the resolution is now 0.125 meters, so 4 times greater in each direction, or 16 times as many triangles. This made our wheel versus terrain collision detection 16 times slower, so we wrote a custom implementation for this for FS25, which is approximately 30 times faster than the old code. So overall, your vehicle physics is now about twice as fast as before, even with all the new features. So the new physics codes involve some quite heavy math and numerical analysis. Fortunately, I have a master's degree in mathematics, which helped me out a lot on this task. And to be fair, yeah, to understand all that, yeah, I totally understand why he's got a master's degree in maths, because it's just insane. Obviously, you know, there's 16 times more polygons, and that's the thing, the triangles, the polygon, so 16 times more than that, which makes it slow. But then they've sped it up, so it's now even faster than before. That's some next level stuff. That's some next level stuff going on right there. Oh, ace, fair enough. So, how does the game handle visual transitions of ground deformation? So, another new feature for FS25 is the terrain quadtree mesh, which enables high resolution triangle rendering near the player but uses a lower resolution further away. There is no need to render the deformed geometry when it's hundreds of meters away. The geometry smoothly morphs from deformed to not deformed some distance from the player. However, this transition is quite well hidden because of a new technology in FS25, which is the Terrain Virtual Texture System. Although deformation is not rendered in the distance using triangles, it is still shaded and rendered into the terrain texture using a graphics technique called normal mapping. So the deformation is still clearly visible even on distance areas where the rendered triangle count is very low, and you can see the tracks left by AI vehicles even if you are watching them from half a kilometer away. Again, this stuff, it's let's face it, right? It's well over my head, and I quite like games, but it's one of those things that, you know, you talk to these experts, and let's face it, they are the experts, and it's just like mind blown stuff. You know, you can't comprehend unless you're into IT and coding and texturing or whatever. I mean, I'm sure some modders are reading this and going, yeah, no problem, bro, I've got that down. No worries. But for the likes of me, yeah, I would just say leave the experts to what they do, and we'll just roll with it, because what they've done is absolutely brilliant. So, last thing on the go. What do you personally like most about ground deformation in the game? So he finishes off, it's a very rewarding experience to implement all these new technologies, and I love the fact that the result is not only a better visual experience for players, but also that it interacts with physics and gameplay in such interesting ways, making FS25 a much more interesting and realistic simulator than ever before. And to be fair, I agree with him. What we've seen so far, obviously I haven't played the game yet, but from what we've seen so far, it's like way and above. Definitely on the immersive side. I mean, I know some people will think, oh, it's just a bit of a reskin of 22, to be fair, but what's coming out, what's being seen with all the stuff, this deformation, however you pronounce that, with all the stuff with the GPS coming in, especially for consoles, and all the other stuff, it does seem, for me, I mean, I will say for me, it does feel like a big jump. I mean, this deformation, ground deformation, yeah, we'll go with that. We'll go with that pronunciation. The ground deformation does feel like something that's just like next level stuff, and you can totally understand why they've gone for current stroke next gen console, however you want to label them. And obviously this is coming out with the game on the 12th of November, and if you're on PC and fancy picking yourself up a digital copy, there's a link down below. Click on that and it helps the channel out at no extra cost to yourselves. And also, if you do pre-order, you get the Macdon pack as well, which is always nice, getting a little bit of a bonus. And obviously this is coming out on PC, Mac, Xbox Series X and S and PS5. If you're on old school gen, if you're on Xbox One like me or PS5, as you can see from today, you are going to need a bit of an upgrade.